Had I been spoiled about what deaths would occur in this week's episode of The God of High School, I probably would have said that sounds probably pretty insane, but I'm not going to get too worked up over them. But after watching this episode, it actually got to me. There's something about blind characters that are apparently badasses that you don't really expect for them to go out. You really expect for them to slap the assassins, the hitmen out. But then when you just see the glasses in a pool of blood, you're thinking to yourself, okay, this series is proving once again that it is not playing by the rules. And I am honestly shocked, I have to say. There's something about just shocking the viewer with a very basic trait for someone, like just the fact that this over-energetic announcer has been blind the whole time, kind of like indicating why he's been wearing glasses in basically a pretty dimly lit room. And then you start getting this kind of like pep talk with you, and you think to yourself, okay, like maybe this will be like almost her mentor, because seemingly we have our boy getting trained by old grandpa doctor who, if you have a sprained ankle, he'll just pop a little pin in your ankle and you're gonna be good as new. Looks insanely painful and just made me cringe because needles going into where he just stabbed, almost like the Achilles heel. You think that's insane, but apparently that acupuncture worked quite well. It just felt like they're more or less establishing like a three-way mentor streak, because of course we have Han, who has been pretty much since day one, at least that we can see, has been basically talking with someone who's been pretty high up. This whole park situation has been very interesting to me, and I thought maybe it wasn't going to be a very trustworthy situation, but after this episode I was thinking maybe that's going to be kind of like his mentor, his guiding light. Then of course we have old Dr. Grandpa, and then we'd have old blind announcer. I thought that's what they were going for, and that's why I think it really shocked me, because it really bought into just like nothing too bad was going to happen in this episode. Yes, we're getting some insane stuff with this cult. I mean, I thought Grandpa was actually going to be a pretty bad person with how they were setting up the episode, but then when you see him annihilate just an insane amount of people, it's like, okay, apparently our boy definitely was raised by a good person, because he ain't taking no shit. But then again, when you see a giant sword come crashing down, I'm like, what even is this series? I don't know, but I'm definitely having a blast with it, because there definitely is this power imbalance that you don't really know what's powerful and what's just normal in this world, because even though we see a giant sword come crashing down, that could just basically be basic bitch power in the grand scheme of things. It's really hard to say what is powerful and what is average, and that's kind of a scary thought to think of. The fact that these beginner fights just to get into the next stage were pretty much nothing in comparison to what they're going to face now, where pretty much everyone is going to be tapping into the power of a god or another being in order to use some insane abilities, summoning their JoJo-like stand, and it's like, okay, apparently that's just the norm, and if you can't do that, you're probably shit out of luck. This series definitely has quite a few tricks up its sleeve, and I'm glad it's not afraid to show them a little early to get your mind wandering and racing to say, I don't know what to expect. You're saying that pretty much every character is going to have one of these stands, and I'm going to call them a stands because it's the easiest way to explain what the hell they are. But then again, at the same time, you have apparently hitmen coming in to basically destroy this tournament. The entire point of the tournament is to basically find the best people to be these keys that they're searching for. I thought this whole tournament was super corrupt, but apparently it's seeming like they're not even the worst people involved, it's more of the people trying to kill them. And I'm like, where do you even try to start to theorize and speculate where the show could go? And honestly, I have no idea, and that's really fun, and that's why you kind of have to take a step back and say, I mean, they're throwing a lot at us. We don't know where we can take this new information about how they can tap into these basically power of the gods. I mean, they're saying that this fruit that he ate is pretty much the reason why he's healthy as a horse, and that's probably the case. But then what about the others? Because apparently there's multiple tiger cubs ready to basically latch out. I mean, you don't change the rules so Mira could join in and have these three fight together for nothing unless you truly believe they are pretty well with the potential of whatever they are searching for. I'm actually really happy that the God of High School is actually taking a kind of step back to really lay out a lot of its world building kind of right now, rather than kind of spreading it out throughout the big tournament and things like that, because I think it's a good idea to really establish that there's going to be a lot of shit that we're going to see that we might want to question, but by establishing it now, we got a good understanding that if there is some insanity with the visuals and we're like, is this even real? Is this something that's just an illusion? We get at least an understanding, a brief understanding that is, of what's happening, so as we're watching these fights, we know we're going to touch more upon this later, maybe in the fight, maybe after the fight, but it shows that there is thought and care put behind the insanity that we are witnessing, so as we're watching these beautiful fights, and at times these supernatural fights, we understand that this is a part of the world, and it's not just anime flair for no reason, but rather it's part of the narrative, and you gotta appreciate smaller details like that, which honestly are pretty big details at the end of the day. And some may want to say that it's pretty convenient that the 3 characters that we got introduced to at the beginning of the anime just so happened to be on the same team, and while that may technically be true, at the same time it seems like there's a narrative reason for them all being there. I mean, you don't change the rules for nothing, so I'm perfectly fine with that. Plus I like all 3, and I think it's quite humorous to see someone who should be, you know, gung-ho like, oh yes, friends get to fight together, disappointed that he can't fight them because they're on his team and he just wants to fight people who are strong, not taking into consideration they're not the only strong people out there. In fact, there's probably going to be way more stronger opponents that they're going to face, and they're going to need that teamwork in order to overtake them and exploit their weaknesses and things like that. I think this show has a lot going for it, and I can definitely understand why this is getting so much attention and hype, and yeah, it's going to have positives and negative buzz around it, because when you have a show as large as this, with a following as massive as this, both with the webtoon as well as the anime now, both new and old fans alike, are going to have pretty strong opinions at the end of the day, and I don't think one is right or better than the other. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people just want to come into this show, understand these characters, have a lot of fun with the fights and the action and just the spectacle in general, while also seeing a pretty crazy story unfold, because I wasn't expecting the story to get as interesting, at least in the first season, but seemingly there's some things going on with this robed group, and it seems like they're basically doing some insanity to the grandpa, which the grandpa seems to be holding his own pretty well, unless he got killed by that sword. It's hard to say what is deadly in this series, and that's kind of a fun feeling, but there was definitely some fun characterization with the grandfather, like the fact that he gave him a picture. He arranged a picture to look like he had parents, even though he clearly doesn't know who his parents are. It's a very interesting thing that if a young boy is going to be living on his own in the city, he has to have like an established narrative that it's not just like he was living with his grandfather in the wilderness, but rather he actually had a loving family that looked pretty normal in the grand scheme of things. I'm imagining it's something to do to cover up his identity, because you don't just keep saying and you don't give this magical fruit to someone unless you truly believe they're someone special. So I definitely think the grandfather had more than just trying to keep him safe, but rather there's probably a more supernatural reason to make him look normal, is my honest and best guess. But still, it's quite interesting to see what they're doing and how they're actually laying out some pretty good groundwork right now that I'm sure is going to lead to some insanity during the battles, after the battles, and things like that. And it'll be very, very fun to see if they're actually going to be able to win, because they're going to be facing some insane opponents, some of which look like they can maybe even annihilate our team, and it's going to take a lot of teamwork to be able to do this, but we haven't seen them work as a team yet. We've seen them work as a team outside of battles, and we've seen them individually, and they're really good, but they all have their pros and cons, and how are they going to work in sync? Sure, they have a couple of weeks to train, but still, training with each other and just, you know, maybe getting a couple of mock opponents, it's not going to be the same thing as people who can summon these powerful spirits or just have these moves you've never seen before. I'm really impressed with what they're doing. This was a very fun episode. It was action-packed at certain points, and honestly, even though you didn't get to see too much Yu content, she honestly has had the shortest end of the stick in terms of her fights. Hopefully now that she's a part of a team, we'll get to see a lot of her combat. That's honestly my biggest gripe with the series as of right now, is we haven't seen as much of her action as we have with the others. But still, I'm very hopeful for this series and its future, because honestly, it's one of the still most enjoyable series you can follow this season, and even if you're not the biggest into action, I think there is a great narrative and character relationships kind of brewing that can keep a lot of people interested. But of course, as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings down below, whether you've read the webtoon or if you're an anime original like myself. What do you think, and where do you think it might go next week? Do let me know. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.